This is your Chargers linebacker, Deion Henley, and you're tuning in with Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to Chargers Unleashed. Dan Wolkenstein, Ryan Dyrud here from the LAFB Network. Today's show is being brought to you by Rock Solid Sports Memorabilia, Mint, Aura, Athletic Greens, and Bet Online. If this is your first time tuning in, hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or X, as the kiddos like to call it, and anywhere else you get your podcast. Ryan Dyrud filling in for a one Jake Hefner, has a little bit less hair than Jake Hefner. Jake's still out on vacation. Ryan, thanks for sitting in for him. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. We've been trying to get on together for like a week, and schedules have been crazy. So excited to be on with you as always, talking bolts. And Jake must get like 8 vacations a week, or a month, or a year. Excuse me. I feel like that guy's always on vacation.
He's living the good life. I will tell you that. He's living the good life. Aloha vibes for the Hefner family. We're trying to hold it down, but I'm telling you, I feel great just to be able to talk to somebody else on a podcast. Because, man, like solo hosting is like another beast.
Yeah, that's rough.
I feel like I'm talking to myself as like my own friend, as like a pillow talk. It's kind of weird. Fun show today. Ryan, Chargers had a football game on Saturday, and damn, did it not disappoint. We're getting into all of kind of the key takeaways, kind of standout players, some of the main storylines, things to look forward to, both positive and negative, as we kind of proceed to the second day of training camp, or day of preseason game, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
But Ryan, I think just starting this thing off, like, man, was that refreshing. I mean, we saw touchdowns on offense, punt return for 6. We saw explosive plays, house calls, rookies and UDFAs balling. We got a running game. Like, the depth looks improved. We're actually seeing like produced results. Like, where are we? What are we watching right now?
Yeah, it was great. I know everyone likes to pump the brakes, and rightfully so, but everyone's like, it's just preseason. But there's things you want to take away from these games. And that's, how does the scheme look? Because obviously they're not going to give too much away. It is preseason, but schematically, how are things looking? How does the depth look? How do the fundamentals look? And all of that, you can say with the resounding positivity, they look very good. So I love it too that, Dan, we've talked about, I'm sure you guys have, how explosive plays doesn't necessarily mean slinging the ball 65 yards. It can just mean a run that goes for 40 plus yards. And we saw 2 of those, and we saw multiple long gains in the running game. We saw a couple passes, but I mean, only 109 yards total passing, I believe, total for the entire game. So it was more on the run game that they were able to do things. So a lot of positives from this game. I was super, super excited for the Chargers after this one.
Yeah, and again, it's not all positive. There are some opportunities for improvement, which we're going to get to. So for the quick agenda today, we're going to be talking about, obviously, the run game transformation. We'll talk about some of the performances and the edge depth kind of coming into play. We'll talk about some of the rookie production, the defense as a whole getting pressure, and then some of the standouts and opportunities for improvement. And of course, we're going to talk about special teams and the flash, Mr. Derius Davis. But before we get to that, let's talk about our friends over at Aura. They are doing identity theft prevention. You guys can help prevent all of the bots from calling you guys. You can help prevent identity theft from people trying to get all your information, trying to get your credit card information, all that jazz. Check out Aura. We're going to talk to you guys here in about 45 seconds after our friends over at Aura are discussed by our friend over at Hawaii currently. Jake Hefner talks about Aura. 1 second.
Have you ever Googled yourself and were shocked to see your personal information exposed on one of those public listing sites? Data brokers are making a fortune selling your information to robocallers, spammers, and others who want to learn more about you, like where you live.
We've been trying to reach you concerning your car's extended warranty.
That's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, Aura. Aura can identify data brokers exposing your info and submit opt-out requests on your behalf, and brokers everywhere are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it super hard to do. So let Aura handle that for you. You could try Aura for up to 2 weeks using this link that we're going to put up here on the screen. Aura also does so much more to protect you and your family from online threats that you cannot see. So make sure to check out aura.com/Chargers Unleashed to get a 14-day free trial and see if your personal information has been leaked online.
So we saw some standout performances by guys like Elijah Dotson, Chris Rumph. We saw Derius Davis. A bunch of the rookies were performing. Easton Stick looked phenomenal. But I think the part that we have to start with in my opinion, and I think this is the biggest takeaway from this first preseason game, is the running game transformation. And I'm not saying that as a hyperbole. Looking at what this running game looked like this Saturday versus what's looked like in years past was night and day. I'm talking scheme, blocking. I'm talking chasm-like holes for the running backs to get through or around. You saw efficiency, 214 yards rushing on the ground on 31 carries. It's a 6.9 yards per attempt. And that's not including the 70-plus yard Isaiah Spiller touchdown that was called back for a holding. The running game, Ryan, we talked about at the beginning, way before a game was played, way before training camp, when Kellen Moore was brought in, that this running game could be the best thing to benefit from Kellen Moore coming in. When's the last time we saw a Chargers game win on the ground? And that's what we saw.
It's been a while. Maybe against the Browns back in week 3 of last year, where Eckler had a great second half.
And even that, Justin Herbert's having to do heroic things to get that game won.
Yeah, exactly. It's been a while, so it was very refreshing. I have a few thoughts. One, I'll just get this out of the way right off the bat, because I know it's annoying, but when we're looking at preseason, got to look at some of the semantics here, and obviously we want to see that it's a great stepping stone to build on. But I'll just say, just remember, no Aaron Donald, no Ernest Jones, the Rams starting star linebacker. When the Rams don't have those two guys, they are going to be literally starting a new player at every other 5 positions in the front 7 this year as opposed to last year. So it's a very suspect front 7 without those two guys. So it would be concerning if the Chargers didn't run good on that unit. But that being said, they didn't just run good, they ran great on it. So then the positives of it, obviously, we didn't see Lindsley, Slater, Pipkins suit up. We did see the 2 young guys in Salyer and Johnson. And then we had a bunch of kind of second stringers and third stringers. So I thought the line depth there looked a lot better than maybe what we had anticipated. We'll have more on that maybe later on, because I think later in the game, there's a little more suspect. But that starting 5 that started this game, I thought looked good. I thought all running backs, Joshua Kelley, Isaiah Spiller, and obviously you mentioned Elijah Dotson, really looked great in the scheme. It was just built better for them as opposed to what they were running in. And then my kind of point.
The one guy that did not look good was actually waived by the team today. Larry Roundtree was waived.
Yes, there you go. Larry Roundtree. It's I mean, when you got guys like Elijah Dotson, who's leading your room with 2 touchdowns, you're probably going to jump a spot there. And now it's the question: do the Chargers keep 4? I mean, it's going to be again, it's one game, but it's going to be hard after seeing that to get this guy off the roster. And so that was my last point, and it's a chagrin point at this point. But guys like Elijah Dotson, with everything I just said about the team you're playing and 4 stringers or whatever, but guys like that can do that are reasons why, unfortunately, guys like Austin Eckler and guys like Ezekiel Elliott and guys like Saquon Barkley are not going to get paid buco's amount of bucks at running back, just because there's always those guys that show out and do amazing things. I mean, that's how Austin Eckler got his job, right? Melvin Gordon holding out, and Eckler shined in preseason and never looked back. So it wasn't a good day for running back contract extensions for what the Chargers were able to do with all their backups.
Yeah, and again, we're not talking about good. We're talking about great. Elijah Dotson, 6 carries, 92 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 15.3 yards per attempt. Joshua Kelley, 54 yards on 9 carries. Isaiah Spiller, 5 for 27 yards. And again, that's not including a 71-yard and another couple that were brought back due to some penalties. Max Duggan, Easton Stick, both got in there for 32 yards combined. Did you know Elijah Dotson and Isaiah Spiller, Ryan, both were 2 of the top 7 rushing grades in the entire NFL this past weekend? Joshua Kelley was not there, but he still played well. Isaiah Spiller, 3rd best rushing grade in the entire NFL. Elijah Dotson, 7th this week. The rushing game looks different. Scheme, athleticism, vision, kind of hit hole, see hole, hit hole. It's one of those things that you see too many east-west things in years past and times to develop, and then everyone's in the backfield. Completely different. And again, that is Kellen Moore's scheme. He makes it very simple. Essentially gives running backs 3 lanes to choose from. If one lane read is not there, on to the next one. If the next one's not there, on to the next one and go to the third. And you saw that come to fruition. Look at the Elijah Dotson, both of those touchdowns. Those were simple reads, and you saw 1-2 gaps were gone, bounce outside, you're out of there. So running game was probably the biggest transformation for me that you saw in week 1. Again, I know it's just 1 week, but when's the last time you saw 214 yards on the ground by a Chargers team? Period.
Exactly.
So it's a big deal. Second one I have here. Edge depth and performance. Edge looked pretty dang good. And again, I know we're not talking about ones versus ones, but we're talking twos versus twos.
Yep.
But across the board, you saw guys up and down the line, 13 hurries as a team, 4 sacks by this Chargers team. Okoye, Angie Farmer, Chris Rumph, Blake Lynch, all getting sacks. Hits were across the board. Carlo Kemp actually had a pretty dang good day as well. And you kind of saw this rolling theme. And that was one of the concerns that the Chargers had, and fans and critics have had, was after the 2 main guys, after Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, can they get some kind of production from the rest of them? You saw, not only did you see Chris Rumph, you saw Thule, who we'll talk about the rookies here in a second, but these guys look good. These guys looked really good. And so the edge depth, which was a concern by a lot of folks, we'll see. Now, Chris Rumph balled out, and we'll talk about him and kind of our standout players. He balled out, but he balled out last year during training camp and during preseason. And I've always kind of felt like it seems like it's clearly the fact that Chris Rumph looks like he's better than the twos. Like, you can just use the eye test, he's better than the twos. But is he there with the ones? I feel like his slot is like right between the two, or at least it was last year. Can he make that jump to hang with the big boys consistently? But overall, I thought the edge depth, I thought the production, getting home, that's something that macro level is a big deal for this Chargers team. Did you notice kind of the collapsing of the pocket as much as I did?
Yeah, no, definitely. And that was I don't even want to call it a concern because I think this team is so loaded, but we talked about it in one of our last episodes, what would be considered the weak spot of the defense, and it was the edge depth. I mean, that's just a fact because of, after those 2 guys, who's going to slot in after them with other positions they went after. But yeah, it was great to see in this, and kind of schematically what they did too. And you had Eamon Ogbongbaniga, who obviously plays a little more inside, but they kind of had him doing twists and stuff on the outside to collapse the pocket. So I thought they showed schematically it was great looking. And then also, these players you mentioned, Chris Rumph and Thule, and guys like getting home and sticking to their job. But I think the important thing was seeing the scheme and guys doing their job and then doing it successfully. And that sounds so dumb and simple, but I think we saw a lot last year. When you look back at the tape of last year, the defense, schematically, guys were kind of in the right place a lot of games, but they just failed in the execution. They just either missed the tackle or ended up hitting the wrong gap or whatever it may be. But schematically, it was sound, and it just wasn't actually coming to fruition. Whereas now this game, we saw schematically, and when the execution aligned together, things are accomplished and things look really good. And so if they're able to do that, that takes the pressure off of having high-end talent as your, backup edge guys. You don't have to have 5 starting quality edge guys, because schematically you can do things that kind of disguise different things and allow different guys to do different twists, have obviously the inside rush they like to do with their middle linebackers. So I was very pleased what we saw from the edge group in terms of execution and in terms of skipping or sticking to that scheme. So, that's definitely a point of, I think, emphasis probably for Staley and Derek Ansley, defensive coordinator. And I think we saw that. And so that's something to build on for the next 2 preseason game heading into week 1.
2 more kind of high-level key themes before we get to the standouts of this game, both highlights and lowlights of this game. Next one, and I think this is a really important one, is we actually saw rookie production in a preseason game. And you compare that to what you saw last year, preseason, or a lot of years, the amount of guys that were producing that are rookies / UDFAs was quite a bit. I'm talking first round pick, Quentin Johnston, Tuli Tupelotu, Deion Henley, Derius Davis, Scott Matlock, CJ Okoye, Cam Brown. All these guys are producing meaningful plays and meaningful production in a preseason game. They're not just sitting back and being depth pieces that aren't playing or performing or executing. We'll talk about Quentin Johnston in a bit here when we get to kind of the single players. But all of them are showcasing talent in live game action. And that's what this Chargers team is going to need to have as you think about roster construction and salary cap and how they can afford to kind of keep this team both productive and successful, is they have to hit on those younger kids.
Yep.
And when you're seeing those guys produce early, that's a great sign. I thought the rookie production was something that we were wondering how much we'd see. And for the most part, I mean, the Chargers got a 81-yard kick,
81.
punt return?
Yeah.
Calling a shot, Derius Davis? Like,
yep.
Good Lord. What do you think about the rookies?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, we talked, Dan, probably almost 2 months ago, a month ago, we did a show together and talked about like the future cap space in 24 and 25. And we basically said the Chargers are going to have to hit on these draft classes just because they won't be able to afford any free agents or even to bring back free agents. They're going to have to rely on their draft classes to groom and kind of take over starting roles. And this is the first step. You know, there's a lot of steps still they have to hit. There's a lot of weeks, a lot of growth that they're going to need to get, but it was a very, very good first step. And, you know, I think Derius Davis, I mean, he was kind of the star of the night, obviously, from this rookie class. I mean, when you return a punt 81 yards that the Chargers didn't have any last year, even with improvements in that unit last year, they still had no returns for touchdowns. And so doing it right off the bat in his first game, I thought was super exciting. CJ Okoye, obviously a lot of excitement around him in his first game, getting a sack. I think Tuli Tuipulotu is going to be a star in this league. I think we knew it coming when they drafted him. I mean, I obviously covered him at USC and knew how talented he was, but I think now fans kind of got a taste of how good he can be. And I think
he's got a nose for the football, man. Like he just knows how to play.
Football player. Yeah. He's not the biggest, not the fastest, not the strongest. He's just extremely intelligent IQ and just goes and gets his nose dirty. And that's why I love the way he plays. So he's going to be great. And then I think QJ, like, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say he had a tremendous night. I think he struggled a little bit, had a couple drops. What I loved about how they utilized him is when everyone thought his night was done, they put him back out there on that 2-minute drive, and then he executed, and he got the touchdown, obviously, from a tremendous pass from Easton Stick, by the way, over a linebacker and in between two other DBs. So
that one DB actually got cut today, by the way.
Yeah,
based off of that.
He did. Yes, he did. Yes. So, you know, I think back to Mike Williams when he was drafted 7th overall, and obviously he's kind of had his trials and tribulations to find his footing. So for anyone thinking, oh man, here we go, 1st round pick doesn't look like a star, I don't have any concerns. I mean, there was some growing pains. There's going to be growing pains. But you know, the way he was able to execute on that drive and get that touchdown shows you all you need to see. And now it's just cleaning some of the fundamentals up, which I think I have zero concern over. So it was a great night for the rookies.
Yeah, I don't know if they gave him 2 or 3 drops for Quentin. The deep one, that's a tough grab to get. Like, I don't know if I put all that on him. Although, like, when you're a 1st round pick, like, he should get that one, but that's a tough one. The other ones, one was a bit outside. The other one was just a drop, obviously. Mm-hmm. But again, like you said, Quentin Johnston, that footwork that he had to get that touchdown in the end zone, like, you can't teach that. I mean, you can't teach that stuff. Shout out to Chris Beatty. But, like, that athleticism for a guy that's that tall to be able to get that much separation on a slant route, like, that takes talent.
Yeah. So here and Dan, just to add on that, like, I don't know if they would have played anyway had they or one guy had he been healthy, but the fact that obviously no Keenan and Mike Williams, and then no Joshua Palmer because of his recent kind of injury in camp, and the fact that how well they were able to move the ball, and obviously the running game was the emphasis, but these young receivers, I mean, Keelan Doss looked pretty good, so I think there should be a lot of excitement about just the depth of receivers. You have arguably the best 2 receivers in football when you look at duos, or at least top 5. It's hard to argue not top 5.
Yep.
And then the 3 and 4 spots are looking pretty damn good, especially if Palmer comes back healthy. And then you got Derius Davis as like your 5, and then you got a few guys after. So I mean, I just think there should be a lot of excitement about this receiver group in general.
And that's without John Hightower or Jalen Guyton being mentioned. Like,
exactly.
You could say top 5, number 1 and 2, and I would say 3-4 is probably top 5 as well. You take your wide receiver 3-4 compared to any other team's 3-4.
Yeah,
they're up there. So rookie production, I think overall was a big one.
If you've ever thought, why in the world is my wireless bill so damn high? Then let me tell you about our friends over at Mint Mobile who we're partnering with for today's video. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network, so they keep costs low by selling directly to you online. They cut out the retail stores and the salespeople. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. So why should you have to pay for more than you have to access the same network? It only takes 15 minutes to switch, and you'll be paying as low as $15 a month for your phone plan. It really is that simple. So use the link in the description below. Try mintmobile.com/Chargers Unleashed to get started. Click the link in the description below or scan the QR code.
And then, look, you can't have an episode without talking about this Chargers special teams being among the highlights, high level of this team.
Yes.
Kicking, Cameron Dicker.
Dude.
100% guy's nails. I think it's his job now.
He might be a top 5 kicker. He might be a top 5 kicker.
He might be a top 5 Dicker. I mean, it's incredible. Top 1 Dicker, top 5 kicker for sure.
Yeah.
J.K. Scott, hang time looked great. Punt coverage, kick coverage. And oh, by the way, Derius Davis breaking ankles, turning on the Jets, swag and all for the return touchdown on a punt, which like even that like is so rare for Chargers fans to see.
Yep.
Special teams just looks locked and loaded. And you saw guys like Deion Henley, by the way, secretly had a very good game. A lot of people aren't talking about him as much as I think they should be. And he played great on special teams and on defense. So that special teams is looking darn good. And it feels good. I don't know about you, Ryan, but it feels good that we're at the point where it almost feels like we don't have to worry about it as much. Like before, anytime there was a special teams play, you're kind of like bracing yourself. Like even if it's like an extra point, you're like, oh God, here we go. But like now, like special teams is the strength of this team. I don't think it's a question. So special teams, I have that as kind of the major theme here. I think that's my 5th major takeaway. Any other kind of key themes, high level macro takeaways before we get to kind of individual gamers and game balls?
Yeah, just to piggyback, I would say special teams you don't have to worry about like at all anymore. Not even like consider. I mean, it just looks great, which is amazing where it was just even a year and a half ago. So kudos to the coaching staff and the guys they brought in to kind of fill out those roles. And, you know, the fact that Dustin Hopkins was kicking so well, who looked like the Chargers finally had their kicker. He goes down in the game you and I were at. And they find this kid, Cameron Dicker, and he's like almost even better. And, you know, poor Hopkins is still kind of fighting for a job in camp, but I think it's Dicker's job. So the one thing I'll say, if we're going to say anything negative, I think the total offensive line depth, when you look at later in the game, showed some flaws. And again, we're being overly critical here. Yep. But if the Chargers, if fans have any concerns about the Chargers edge depth, Rams fans have concerns over edge starters. Like they don't have a starter at edge position for the Rams. And the fact that they're in the 4th quarter getting sacks from Taylor Thomas and Tanner Engel and whatnot. And Daniel Hardy got a sack. So no disrespect to those guys. Obviously we cover that team as well, the Rams as well on LA Football Network. But I mean, their depth at defense is a huge concern. And the Chargers offensive line did show some breakdown later in the game. I think they looked great in the beginning of the game. Part of that, I think, was Easton Stick, has his maturity in the pocket has vastly improved. We didn't really mention him too much, but I thought Easton Stick had a phenomenal game. And then you you switch over to Max Duggan. I think it's a different style a little bit. And so maybe Duggan just wasn't quite as comfortable in the play calling or the pocket. Maybe that led to it. But if we have to throw any negatives, that would be it. It wasn't like a huge negative. They only gave 3 sacks, but still 3 of those coming on, I believe, like just two possessions there in the late 3rd, early 4th quarter. So just something to watch for. But I think overall the offensive line depth is good. Just it's not as deep maybe as you would like. But beggars can't be choosers when you look at this roster.
Yeah, I think there's a definitive difference between when you saw Easton Stick out there than when you saw Max Duggan out there, and the line protection, both running and passing. Like there was a series or two where it was Max Duggan and or Larry Roundtree in the backfield constantly. Like they didn't even have a chance. So again, like that goes down to, again, we're talking like 3rd string realistically of this Chargers team. So, before it was, if we lose a 1st stringer, we're screwed. Now it's kind of like, all right, well, maybe if we lose a 2nd stringer, then we're screwed. But 2nd string, we should be good. But I agree with you. Like, if there's a weakness in terms of depth after the second level, I would say offensive line is one to look for.
Yeah, but we're pulling at strings there. I mean, come on.
Yeah, but it's not all sunshines and rainbows.
Yeah,
here
I
on
got to throw
Chargers
something out.
Unleashed.
Got to throw some growth out there.
Let's get into some performers and standouts on this team. And I mentioned Deion Henley, which we'll talk about here in a sec. There are some gamers that came to play on this team. And I think you have to start with Derius Davis, is what he was able to do. You talked about a little bit the punt return. You saw some wiggle with him on offense as well. Yep. That's not something that you saw much at training camp so far. And so for them to spend a 4th round pick on a returner, then you saw kind of the rules of the return game change. But then for him to go out and execute game 1, first opportunity, bam, that says something. And I think more than anything else, that's now on tape for opposing teams moving forward as a weapon that the Chargers have that they're going to have to account for. And so that's just one more level where this Chargers team can win. Derius Davis was one for me. What do you think about him?
Yeah, that looked great. I mean, he's another wrinkle in that offense. We obviously know what he can do now on special teams, which I think was I'm not going to pretend like I'm in the heads of Telesco and Staley, but that was probably the main majority reason for drafting him, was for his special team ability. But if you're able to get some juice on offense as well, which we obviously know his speed and his breakaway ability, that's just like, cream, some extra, can't think of the saying right now. Gravy. Sure. Yeah. It's like cream on the pie. I don't know what I was trying to say, but anyway, that's just extra goodness you can have. And so I thought, yeah, he looked great and loved his ability. And I don't think his size is going to be an issue at all, which maybe some people talked about, but I think he dispelled that as being an issue. So great game for Derius Davis. Excitement about the continued growth of his.
A couple of defenders that you're probably going to be seeing a lot during the actual regular season. Deion Henley, Chris Rumph. Deion Henley looked great. 10th best linebacker coverage grade, according to PFF, in the entire NFL for his preseason. 80.4.
Why he was drafted.
That's why he was drafted for coverage, and you're seeing it come to fruition. You saw a deflected pass. You saw the physicality. I have a couple posts on Twitter where Deion Henley just takes a full head of steam and just blows up the offensive lineman. I think they were guards both times. And you can audibly hear the crack of the helmets or of the contact. And Deion Henley is bringing the boom. And you're seeing kind of his versatility. And on special teams, I think he made one of the tackles on the return, on the coverage. Looks very good. I love what Deion Henley brings, set the tone physically, in my opinion. And then Chris Rumph, 4th highest pass rush grade across the entire NFL, according to PFF. 92.5 was a top graded Chargers player, according to PFF. Derek Anthony talked about him at the presser afterwards, actually today, about how he's looked bigger and stronger and more consistent, brings more strength and explosion. Those two guys, I think, were probably the best performing players on defense for different reasons. But Deion Henley, Chris Rumph, both look pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, great. I think you'll see those guys playing on Sundays. Obviously, they're probably going into the season. Well, for sure, Rumph goes in the season as a backup. Henley probably as a backup, but they're going to see time depending on what their role looks like. So, great games, and we'll probably still see a lot for sure of Henley over the next 2 preseason games. So if you can keep stacking that and continue that coverage ability, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all, Dan, if, by week 2, 3, 4, 5 that we see, Kendricks and Henley as your 2 starting backers. So lot to be excited about.
I don't know if I would go that far with saying that Kenneth Murray is going to get beat out by Deion Henley yet, only because you're seeing so much praise by everyone about Kenneth Murray. But again, we'll see. But I think him getting on the field more than you probably thought for sure. Yeah. A couple defenders in the secondary that I thought had really good games. You heard a lot about Cam Brown. People talked about him, the UDFA corner. He had an 88.3 defender grade per PFF, second best performer in terms of total grades behind Chris Rumph. Cam Brown and then Deane Leonard quietly having himself a damn good offseason so far. Preseason, training camp. Deane Leonard has looked very good out at camp when I've been there. And there's one day in particular where he had like 5 or 6 PBUs by himself. And then fast forward to Saturday. Deane Leonard out there, special teams, obviously, is what he made his name for. But now you're starting to see him and his speed in coverage. And you're saying that there was one play where he had a PBU in the end zone, looked very calm, cool, collected, flexing on people, crossing his arms. Like he's definitely got some swag. And the team is starting to notice kind of what he's brought and has been praising him a bit. So those two guys, Cam Brown, Deane Leonard, I would say were the two defensive backs that seem to have the best of days. Although Deane Leonard should have had a pick six. There was one that was in his hand. He jumped the route. He was right there. He just didn't finish. That will be my opportunity for improvement. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, Deane Leonard, Cam Brown both look good.
Yeah, work on those hands. Those guys look great. Little JT Woods, Mark Webb didn't look great. If we're sticking to secondary, I think there needs to be some improvement there, but we'll keep it positive. And yeah, the other two I thought looked real good overall.
All right. So this isn't all sunshine and rainbows. There are areas of opportunity for improvement. And you saw some of it come to light already with the waiving of Larry Roundtree. That was going to be one of the things, but then you saw earlier today that he was waived by the Chargers team. Of all the rushers that looked good and the total numbers, Roundtree was probably the outlier, and not in a good way. And he's now no longer on the team. You mentioned Mark Webb. I think this was a huge opportunity for Mark Webb, and he did not look great, in my opinion. You saw a couple really bad angles. Mark Webb needs to have a better day. And JT Woods playing better, and Mark Webb's not playing that well. That safety 3-4 spot is up for grabs. And right now it's going to JT Woods and not Mark Webb, if we're being honest. Yeah. Another one, I mentioned it before, but you said hands. DBs need to finish. Jazeer Taylor had interception, gimme in his hands, dropped it. Deane Leonard, gimme, pick six after he put himself in perfect position, dropped it. Those are the types of plays that the Chargers defense needs to hit on.
Well,
especially in the type of scheme.
Those are game-changing plays because the Rams ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive. They could have had 2 interceptions and instead give up a touchdown. So, I mean, those are plays in the regular season you have to make, or you find yourself in losses you shouldn't have.
Point blank. You mentioned pass blocking. We talked about kind of the depth coming into light later in the game. I think that's something that we'll probably need to see improvement, and I'm sure that's going to be harped on by the coaching staff as they get to the second preseason game against the Saints. There were a few pressures given up, and some of the run fits weren't necessarily working towards the end of the game, aside from the Elijah Dotson. But I think it was kind of like in that third quarter that looked a little leaky at times. And then Quentin Johnston. Again, I'm not saying he was bad. This is not me saying Quentin Johnston was bad, but areas of opportunity for him. You know, you talked about kind of the hands thing. Again, is it just a blip? Is it his first game? Are there nerves once he's in his head? Maybe. But those are growing pains as a rookie. And look, Jamar Chase had drops in his rookie year. And people said that, oh, he's a bust because, you know, he's dropping balls. And look what happened. I'm not saying he's going to be Jamar Chase, but Quentin Johnston has shown me nothing that concerns me long-term about his success. But teaching moment. Those are teaching moments for this coaching staff. And growing pains that honestly are kind of a good thing. Like, you don't want to see him just do great all the time because at some point it's going to hit him. So you saw him come back from it with a touchdown at the end, which really is what matters most. Yeah. But overall, I'd say those are kind of the areas of improvement that I'm most looking forward to seeing. Pass blocking depth. DBs need to finish with those interceptions. Wide receivers. We'll see what happens now moving forward. Looks like Josh Palmer is now back on the practice field. I think he's rehabbing currently, but he's back out there on the field again. Mm-hmm. John Hightower looks to be back. So I think this next preseason, you're going to see a little bit more wide receiver action than you did this week. Any other takeaways you have from the first preseason win, 34 points scored by Los Angeles Chargers?
Yeah, just last point on Quentin Johnston. I hope that he plays the final 2 preseason games both. Being someone that I played receiver back in high school football, and I'm not concerned about it, but just to say this point, like when you do start dropping the football, you tend to start getting the yips, sadly, as bad as that is. And having played, like if you have a few games where you have some drop balls, it's in your mind all the time. And you start focusing on that so much and get away from route running, get away from other execution stuff. So hopefully he, can get in these last 2 games, have fully clean games with no drops. And again, I'm not saying those were all blatant drops, but 3 drops is 3 drops. And so hopefully they'll let him finish out the preseason, get some strong and that's why I liked, as I mentioned earlier, so much. They put him back in. He got that touchdown because sometimes you just need that positive momentum to build on and stack on as you go on. So I'm not concerned at all, but definitely something I want to see them continue to do, because that can be concerning if going into the season, all of a sudden there's, 7 preseason drops or something. Then that's something to watch for, because we saw it, Charger fans obviously have watched a lot of Broncos football. Jerry Jeudy early in his career has had a lot of issue with drops, and he's had so much talent, but he hasn't really fully overcome drops yet. And so you just don't want to see that starting early on as a rookie.
Yeah. So overall, I would say it was a wildly successful first preseason game. And just eye test, that looked way more fun to watch than I've seen preseason games in a minute. We've watched some terrible preseason games by these Chargers, so you need to appreciate the good ones.
Yeah, it was a fun game.
Ryan, appreciate you hopping on, man. I know, Jake does way better with us on our intros, but we held our own. Although you do pretty damn good on your intros too, so maybe I'm just giving myself slack here. But Ryan, appreciate you. What are you guys working on over with LAFB as a whole? What are you doing this week?
I will be out at USC practice today. Depending when you listen to this, it is Monday. So today and Wednesday. So a lot of excitement surrounding obviously SC and that program and the returning Heisman and Lincoln Riley. So always fun doing that. And obviously we cover Rams and UCLA as well, and plenty of great, the best Chargers content, editorial, and then obviously podcast. Thanks to you guys. So, but yeah, thanks as always fun hanging out.
I love it. Ryan Dyrud, you can find him at Ryan Dyrud LAFB on X, as they call it now. For Ryan Dyrud, Dan Wolkenstein, Chargers Unleashed and LA Football Network, thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time on Chargers Unleashed.